This is a Hello Fresh box with
How's everybody? I think we'll just give it a few more minutes just to wait for those who want to bake along to join in, and then we can start. Hello. I'm good. How are you guys? That's good. All right, so I'll move the camera so you can't actually see me. If I can get it to move. There we go. Can't wait for you guys to bake the 72-hour dough as well. How big is a brownie? We're gonna make Madeleines today, actually. So it's something a little different. You've probably seen the recipe on the channel already for the whiskey ones. So today we're just gonna make something that's a bit more classic. So yeah. All right, so I guess we're gonna get started if no one else if everybody has their ingredients with them. We'll get started. So first off, we're gonna have to sift the flour. So I'll move the camera back down so you can actually see what I'm doing. I've got a scale here, and I always use a weighing scale because it gives me a more accurate measurement. And I know a lot of you have asked for cup measures. Unfortunately, I don't really use cup measures, so yeah, the weighing scale is what I would normally use. So over here, we're gonna need 100 grams of all-purpose flour, which is what I always write AP flour, and that's what I mean by that. It's just all-purpose flour. And I'm gonna sift it in, although usually I would just, not bother. But for this, we're gonna sift it in just to be sure we get the right results. Just being a bit more accurate here. So 100 grams of all-purpose flour for those who are baking along as well. Can you pipe the Madeleines into a flower shape? I haven't actually tried it, but you would have to pipe it into a mold that has a flower shape. If not, it won't hold its shape because the batter is quite soft. So I've got 100 grams exactly in that. And what we're gonna need is 3 grams of baking powder. So I know that's a bit hard to measure with a weighing scale that is this big because it's not going to be that accurate. What I would say is that we're going to use a mini one. You don't have to use it. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to tell you how many teaspoons that is actually going to bring out. It should be about 3/4 of a teaspoon, but let's see. Now, yeah, a weighing scale is a good investment. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen on that side as well. I've got a laptop set up, so it takes me a while to just look at your messages and respond as well. Cool. So I've got baking powder over here, and with this particular recipe, I would just want to highlight that you need to ensure that your baking powder is not too old. So if it's been sitting in your shelf in your pantry for the last few years, I would suggest getting a new bottle. I usually get the smaller one so that once I use it, I can get a smaller one so I can open it and it'll be fresh again, because it does lose its potency over time. So unfortunately, over the COVID period, it's hard to find the smaller ones because everyone's bought it. So I've got a big one here, and I opened this yesterday, so still really fresh. But yeah, my baking powder usually sits in my pantry for 6 months before I use it up, but that's because I bake quite often. Yeah, so 3 grams of baking powder will be this is a 1/4 teaspoon over here. So a 1/4 teaspoon is about 1.5, so it's about 1/2 teaspoon. And I level it out to compact it so it gets, yep, so that's 3.08 exactly. So 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder is what you want if you don't have a scale. So I'm gonna turn that off, put that aside. So I've got the flour here again with the sift. You don't need the sift, but I'm using one. And yeah, so we're just gonna add the 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder to the 100 grams of flour. And we'll just sift it in. Sorry. So I've got a whisk and I'm just going to mix it up just so the baking powder is incorporated into the flour. So I'm just gonna we're just gonna pause on this for a few moments just so I can look at your messages and to let everyone who's following and baking along catch up. What scale am I using to measure the baking powder? That's a good one. I'm using this. I'm just gonna put that there. It's an AWS measuring scale, but it just does a pretty accurate measurement down to 0.01. 1 second. So it goes down to 0.01 of a decimal sort of thing. So you get a pretty accurate measurement for really light powders. So for spices, it's perfect as well. That's why I use the spices when I need, 1/2 gram or something. And this is really good for that. Hello, Argentina. Where else is everybody from? Yeah, this is the first live stream on YouTube. I've done 2 on Instagram previously. And yeah, so it's nice to be able to do one on YouTube. Something different. And yeah. Always a bit scary to do it for the first time, but hopefully it's all good. So, hi Melbourne, I feel you with the lockdown, definitely. So here's the butter. We've got 100 grams of unsalted butter. Mine is actually really quite cold because if you follow me on Instagram, you probably know my room temperature is pretty much 20 degrees, which is not really that warm. Even with the heater on, which is in the background, you can probably hear it coming on. So here's 100 grams of unsalted butter, and what we're gonna do is that we're just gonna melt it down. My stove is, where's my stove? 1 second. So my stove is there, as you can see. So I'm just gonna take this and we're gonna melt it down here on a really low heat, just so it melts nice and slow. Hi, Brazil. You have a mini Madeleine mold, about 1 inch per cake. Baking time. I'm not too sure about the baking time for that. So since we're talking about Madeleine molds, let me just adjust it again so you can see. Whilst the butter is melting, I've got a few over here. Ugh, that's really loud. I've got a few over here, as you can see, and that's just a cupcake tin. But what I was gonna say is that you could really use any shape tin that you like. A cupcake one will work fine. This one is a bit more shallow, and this is the one that I really like using. It gives me a really nice shape. So yeah, and yeah, they are quite large, but they are pretty good, and I really do like it. Alright, so the butter is still melting away, and we're just going to swirl the pot a bit just to get it to melt a little bit more evenly. Hello to the new subbers. Thank you for following along. Yeah, so if it's half the size of the tray, you're probably going to need a lot less batter. We'll go through that tomorrow when we actually bake it off. So today we're just making the Madeleine batter, and tomorrow we can actually bake it off. Yeah. And yeah. So I hear it sizzling, which is not what you want. You just want it to melt really slowly. So I'm just going to take it off the heat and swirl it. Just so it's, you know, melting evenly and we're not evaporating too much of the moisture from the butter. Thank you. I do like the kitchen. It is small in that sense. I don't know if you can see, I can pretty much reach both sides if I do that. Yeah. So no, you don't have to preheat your oven because we're not baking it today. We'll be baking it tomorrow, and I'll go through why we'll do that in a bit. I just want to wash this butter over here. Okay, so just gonna turn off the flame. 1 second. Gonna readjust the camera again. So as you can see, it's just melted. So there's still a little bit of like smaller pieces in there, but that's fine. The residual heat will actually melt it. As a point of reference, it is 62 degrees, which is actually what we want it to be when we want to use it. But I'm just gonna set it aside for now while we work on the rest. Alright, so what we're gonna need is eggs. And I've got 2 large eggs in this tin over here that I've whisked up. And we're gonna need 100 grams of eggs, which is slightly under 2 large eggs. If you really want to just skip the measurements and just add 2 whole large eggs, you could do that. What happens is that if you have too much eggs in your batter, it will actually turn the batter a lot softer. But your final cake will actually also be a little bit more moist and a little bit more tender as well. It's just a matter of how do I say it? It's just a matter of the texture, the final texture that you prefer. I'm going for 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of eggs, and 100 grams of sugar, essentially split between sugar and honey. So that's a very basic ingredients ratio that I'm using today. So we're just gonna go 100, just mix it up just to be sure. And so we're going for 100 grams. Like I say, it's pretty negligible. It's almost 2 large eggs. As you can see, there's very little left in there. There's probably about, I would guesstimate, 6 grams worth of eggs in there. Oops, yeah, 6 grams of eggs in there. So yeah, it's up to you how you want to do it. You don't have to be as finicky as I am right now. So here's 100 grams. And then we're gonna add the sugar. I hope everyone's caught up if you're baking along. So, all right, cool. Yeah, so egg sizes really differs a lot. So where we are in Australia, when I say a large egg, usually what that means is that when I crack the egg, I'm gonna get about 52 grams, 53 grams of eggs. But it's not the same for every egg in the carton, because they obviously just weigh the whole carton as 12 pieces and you know, distribute it after that. So this is just 100 grams of eggs, and yeah. So we're going to put in 90 grams of white sugar. That's 91, so I'm just going to take a little bit out. Actually, I'm going to use that. Oh. That's 90 grams of sugar in there. And we're going to put in 10 grams of honey. So we're going to have this Madeleine tomorrow with the coffee that we'll be brewing, that my brother will be showing us live how to do latte art and the different beans and the flavors. So to keep it as neutral with a bit of flavoring to it, I'm just using 10 grams of honey, and I'm using this Tasmanian leatherwood honey that I really, really like. It's just what I like. But I've got other honeys as well. If you want, you can use a strong honey, or you can use something that's more neutral. It's up to you. And the honey also makes it moist, so everybody's favorite would. Yeah, so it keeps it moist, it makes it sweet, and it gives it a bit of flavor. And 10 grams of this. It's like another 2 more grams needed, so. Come on. All right, that's 100. And we're just gonna whisk it all up until it's nice and incorporated. Yeah, the honey is really quite sticky. If you want it to be a lot smoother and easier to incorporate, you can just heat it up, but I didn't heat mine up, so it's quite, yeah, firm. Not looking to beat any air in. I just want to make sure that everything is incorporated, including the honey, because the honey, as you saw, was quite firm. So just want to be sure it's nice and smooth. And looks good. Yeah, you can use any kind of honey as mentioned. So yeah. So that's that bit here, which is really quite simple. There really isn't too much to this recipe, to be honest. It's just making sure that you got your measurements right and each step right. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the flour in, and because I've got a sift here and I've already used it, so I'm just gonna once again sift it back in. And we're just gonna mix it up. And what we're going to do is that, I know it's not fully incorporated just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some vanilla bean paste. You can use vanilla extract, or you could just leave it all together, or you could actually zest in some lemon zest, and that would be really, really nice. But I didn't want it to be too strong with the flavoring, so we're just going to go for something a bit more neutral in that sense. I love vanilla, and so I'm just going to use vanilla over here. Yeah. The measurements are in the description, but I'll update the description just so that it has the exact measurements in there. We're gonna use half a teaspoon, which is really nice, and yeah, it smells really good. So I'm gonna use half a teaspoon of the vanilla bean paste. If you're using vanilla extract, you can use 1 teaspoon. I'm gonna use this to just make sure I get every bit out because it's precious, so don't want to waste any. Alright, so here's the vanilla bean paste with the flour that's not fully mixed in, but it's perfectly fine. And we're just gonna mix it in. I'm gonna take it off a scale for now. So normally with cakes, what you do is that you just stop right here and you don't bother mixing in once the flour is all incorporated. But because we want the hump on the Madeleine, you want to build a little bit of elasticity into the actual dough. So you want to form a little bit of gluten into the actual batter itself, and that helps with creating the hump as well. But you don't want it to be a tough cake. So what I like to do is, after I see like there's no more flour in there, I like to just give it about 5 to 10 whisk strokes, just so that it, yeah, just builds a bit of gluten in there. So you can see the batter has changed and the consistency is different. So with vanilla bean, so there is vanilla extract, there's vanilla essence, and then there's vanilla bean paste and your vanilla beans. The extract is better than the actual essence, because the essence one is usually, well, vanilla flavoring, usually has that chemical taste to it. Yeah, so you either use vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste. I like the speckles in it, especially since this is going to be a very simple cake. I just want it to, just want to use the vanilla bean in this. But usually I'll use vanilla extract for most of my baked items that you see recipes that I've posted on my blog and on YouTube. So yeah, cool. So that's the actual cake there, the batter, sorry. As you can see, it's quite, yeah, it has a bit of structure to it, so it's not too soft, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm gonna put that there, and we're gonna take the melted butter. Okay, so we've got a melted butter here, and the current temperature of the melted butter is 47, 46 degrees Celsius. You want it to be round about, because I'm talking for quite a bit, obviously, it's cooled down quite a bit, but you want it to be between 40 to 60 degrees. The reason for that is Sorry, since I'm going to be talking, I may as well look at the camera. So the reason behind why we want the actual butter to be between 40 to 60 degrees is because if it's too cold, it's not going to incorporate really well, and it's going to, when you pour it into the batter, it might actually solidify rather than incorporating itself into the batter. And with the if it's too high, you actually activate the baking powder in advance, which is not what you want. You want it to actually just you just want it to be warm enough to incorporate, but not too hot that you'll actually activate the baking powder before you want it to happen when you bake. Because then you lose that lift that the baking powder gives you once it hits the heat. So yeah, that's the butter. I'm assuming after all that talking, it's a bit cold. I'm just gonna quickly warm it up very quickly. Sorry for the constant up and down of the cameras. That should be... Oh, so that's about, we're back up to about 46 again. It's really quick. Oops. So then I'm just going to pour it in. And I want to get every bit in. When I melt my butter, I usually melt about 101 grams, 102 grams, because some do actually stick to the bowl itself. So I'm just gonna, So when I pour it in, I get about 100 grams in there, just to make it a bit more accurate. But you could just weigh it out, or you could just put 100 grams. It's up to you. It doesn't have to be so fussy. So yeah, so we're just gonna mix it in gently. You don't want the butter to splash everywhere, so be careful. As you can see, it doesn't happen too quickly, but it is incorporating slowly, which is fine. So we just take our time. Croissants. Croissants live is going to be really hard because there's a lot of waiting in between the actual making process. While we're folding the thing, so it's going to be a very long live. Alright, so it's all incorporated, and that's how it looks like. I don't know if you can see the consistency. That's what it's like. It's quite soft. So if you were to pipe it right now, it's not going to work well. And there's a few reasons for that. It won't hold the shape, so it will actually flatten out a bit when you pipe it. So you're not going to get that lovely hump that you're probably looking for when you make Madeleines. And this is where we're going to refrigerate the actual batter. Now I'm going to swap to a spatula just so I can get the sides of the bowl. The reason why we want to refrigerate the batter is that when it's cold, it actually bakes a lot better. As you can imagine, if the batter was cold, the heat will hit the outside first, which means it sets the outside, whilst the inside still remains cold, and as it cooks, it puffs up, and so the crust forms and it splits, and it gives it a hump as well. But also, whilst it's in the fridge, the dough the flour gets hydrated and absorb some of the moisture. It's also a lot easier to pipe because obviously it's firmer. All the butter that's in here will firm up, as you can imagine, in the fridge. And yeah. that's a few reasons why we like to refrigerate the batter. So you can cling wrap it right now, put it in the fridge, and have it in there for until it's at least firm enough to pipe, at the very least. And that would be, I would say, 3 to 4 hours is a nice time. Alternatively, put it overnight, which is why we're starting tonight, and then tomorrow we can actually pipe it. With this, because there's baking powder in here, I wouldn't leave it for too long in the fridge. Around under 48 hours, definitely. 24 hours is what I would suggest. As in before 24 hours, bake it so that, you know, you don't lose the potency of the actual baking powder in this. And yeah. Brown butter for Madeleines. Yeah, so I can see there's a response already. And yeah, it's on the blog, and there's a YouTube video as well on the brown butter Madeleines as well. But I just want to keep it really simple today, so we're just going to use melted butter instead of brown butter. Because tomorrow I'm going to the cafe and I'm going to be baking it in the cafe. I'm going to actually pipe it, not pipe it, but I'm going to put it into a piping bag right now. And we're just going to tie it up and bring it to the cafe so that I don't bring a bowl there and you know, make a mess. Less things for me to transport. So I'm just going to transfer the batter into this piping bag. So yeah, we're just going to transfer the batter into the piping bag. Like I said, you could zest some lemons and add it to it. You could add some rum if you want. It'd be nice. Vanilla and rum is great. Or you could, yeah, do whatever sort of flavor you want. If you want to use cocoa powder or matcha for chocolate or wild cocoa Madeleine or matcha Madeleine, I would suggest reducing the amount of flour, or because cocoa powder and matcha powder does absorb the moisture a lot more than regular flour. So just keep that in mind when you're adding those kind of flavorings to your batter. If not, your Madeleine might turn out to be a little bit dry. Usually when I bake these little cakes, I would, like I said, leave it in the bowl. And then the next day I would give it a good mix. Actually press down some of the air that may have been built up over the resting period in the fridge. So 1 second. So not. Yeah, so that's the batter. I'm gonna tie it up in a bit, and we'll just bring it to the cafe tomorrow, and we'll pipe it straight out of the bag. Like I said, I usually just leave it in the bowl, but for today, we're gonna put it in a piping bag, and I'll tell you why I put it in the bowl. So, like I said, once it rests in the fridge, it does build up some air bubbles to ensure a more even crumb. You want to, before you bake it tomorrow, take a spatula and just press it down and give it a good mix. Not too much, but just to knock some of the air out that may have built overnight. And yeah, put it in the piping bag and pipe it, or you could just use 2 spoons and yeah, transfer the batter onto your Madeleine molds or your cupcake molds. For me, because these are really big, this actually takes 30 grams worth of batter in here, and I like weighing it to make sure that I've got 30 grams in each one, but you don't have to. 90% of the mold is good, so fill it up to about 90% full, just so it doesn't overflow when it actually bakes, because the baking powder will cause it to puff. Yeah, so the piping just makes it pretty and more evenly filled out. So when it bakes, you know, the whole entire batter is actually evened out, because the batter itself might be quite stiff straight out of the fridge. So if it doesn't fill actual Madeleine mold flat, it might bake unevenly and you have that lopsidedness to it, but it's not necessary. Just use a spoon, flatten it out a bit. When it bakes, it'll melt and even itself out as well anyway, and it'll bake up. I'm gonna wash my hands because it's quite dirty. Yeah. What, do you guys have any other questions about this particular recipe that maybe I can answer for you or help? Yeah, clarify if I can. I've actually got a few notes as well, but I don't know if I've covered everything. Right, so another thing to note is that with the brown butter whiskey ones, I believe there's almond meal in the recipe. So you could substitute some of the some of the flour in here with cornstarch, but I don't like doing that, just to make it a bit more tender. Or almond meal does a good job. It is incorporating nuts and a different flavor and a different texture to it, but it does make it moist, and it also keeps it hydrated. Like I said, it keeps it moist, and it also makes the crumb a little softer, so it's a lot more tender. And yeah, so that's what almond milk can do for it. Yeah, I don't think there's really too much more to mention about this particular recipe. It's really quite straightforward. You want everything to be at room temperature, so my eggs were at room temperature. I mean, sugar and flour were obviously at room temperature for me. The honey was a bit cold, but that's why I mixed it up a little bit longer when we added the sugar. And yeah, do you need to cool down the mold between if you need to make several batches? One second, I'm just going to move my computer here. Okay, so you need to cool down the mold definitely between the actual batches that you're baking, only because if the mold is hot, your cake, while you're still piping or transferring the actual batter, is gonna start cooking the batter, and it's gonna cook unevenly, and it's gonna melt it, and it's just not what you want. The whole point was to put in cold batter into your mold so that when it bakes, the heat hits it and it actually puffs up nicely and bakes evenly. So that's what you want. So added too much zest. How much zest do you add? Is it, I don't think it would be too much, is it? It's just be really lemony, or whichever zest you end up using. It should be quite nice. Do I have a different recipe for croissants which you should use? You really want? How large is large? I guess it just comes down to the fold. I mean, this is no longer Madeleine and we're talking about croissants, but just to touch on that, you do a double fold and you do a single fold, and that will give you a bit lesser layers, and when it, that means the crumb will be a bit more wider, I would say. But it's a preference really, on how you do it. So yeah. And Madeleine's feeling like lemon curd, etc. What would I recommend? I've done a whole bunch of different things. So I've stuffed it with salted caramel before, and that was great. Smoked salted caramel, actually. That was really, really nice. I love it. I did a chestnut one, which is good as well. Lemon curd is good. I love that. Spatula spread. If you've got spread, just pipe it in and be good. But pipe it in after it's baked. So bake the Madeleines, pipe it in, and you'll be good. Let it cool down first before you pipe though, because if it's too warm, your cake will be very, very soft. Which step? So what? Sorry, I'm just going through your questions. So what is the percentage of the flour do you need to reduce if you want to make the blackout version? You do have to reduce the amount of flour you use. I'm not too sure. It's really a trial and error. Yeah, it's a bit hard to say. It depends how much cocoa powder you decide to put in to make it the blackout version. I haven't actually done it, obviously. I do have a recipe myself that I use for the chocolate one, but that includes a whole bunch of other things and it's totally different from this. So I'll say play around with it. Reduce your flour by about, I'd say 15. Well, I mean, if you put in 15 grams of cocoa powder, maybe take away 20 grams of flour instead. I'm guessing here, so I'm not too sure. Just play around with it and see how it goes. Add in the flavoring. You can add in the flavoring for the matcha powder. I would suggest, because matcha is quite fine, I will sift it in together with the flour, just so it's incorporated throughout. And then when you add the flour, you add the, the matcha just goes in because it's sifted into the flour itself. So I'm just reading the orange and lime one. Fruit Loops, that's really cute. I'm sure it'd be very tasty still. Yeah, so the tops become kind of sticky and sticks to your hand. It shouldn't really be sticky. Mine are never that sticky. It just sounds like it wasn't set. I'm not too sure what recipe you used. It could be the recipe itself, so that could cause it to be sticky. Could be, like I said, I don't really know how your Madeleines turned out, so I can't really say what could be the reason. Yeah, or what recipe you're using. So sorry. Salted egg filling, isn't that popular in Singapore? Yeah, salted egg is so good. You want to substitute eggs in the Madeleine recipe. I have never tried substituting it, so I don't really know. And I don't really recommend substituting egg, only because I've never tried it personally. But if you do try it, let me know how it goes and leave a comment so I will know. Yeah. And so everyone else who wants to substitute egg will also know. Do any of you have any other questions about this particular recipe? Cool. So yeah, so for now, I'm going to put that in the fridge and I'm going to transport it to the cafe tomorrow, where we'll be baking it off together live as well. And for those of you who can't tune into the live to bake, the bake times is pretty much whatever the Whiskey Madeleine one was, but I'm going to change it up a little bit tomorrow. I've never worked with a oven in a cafe, so we're going to see how that goes. That's going to be fun. And then my brother's going to show everyone latte art tomorrow, the different beans, go through the different just the different processes that he goes through. And I'll try to do some Insta stories on the dialing up section of the actual coffee bit before we go live. So yeah, it'll be on my stories. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. And yeah, so you can see dialing in. So you can see the dialing in. And yeah, and I'm going to try to do some latte art after he teaches it. Never done it before. A bit worried what it'll look like. It probably look like a blob, but yeah. And he'll answer any coffee questions that you got. We're going to do a mocha pot as well, how to brew coffee at home, and how to do latte art using home equipment. So I'm going to bring my Nespresso milk frother thing that a few of you have asked if you could use that to do latte art. So I haven't tried it, like I said. I don't think he's tried it. So we're going to test it out before we go live and see how that goes. And yeah, we'll do a few other things. So yeah, to those who can join tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you there. And for those who have joined in today, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, maybe we'll do another live next time, and let me know what sort of recipes you want to see. Cool. If you guys, I'll give it another minute or so, because I know last time I did a live on stories, it lagged out, and so no one could I couldn't see the messages that were posted. So I'll give it another minute and see whether you have any other messages before I turn off the live. Uncle Tetsu cheesecake. Oof, the Japanese cheesecake. That is hard. I tried it once, I think, as in tried to make it once. It wasn't very successful, so that will require a lot of testing. Maybe we'll do that. I'm not 100% sure about it. I do love eating it though, so yeah. Okay, so I'm excited to see how it bakes up tomorrow. It could be a disaster because I never used the oven before, but we shall see. And if I have enough time, maybe we'll even do it with the 3 different molds. I'll bring it all with me and we'll see how many Madeleines we can get out of it. And if you have any questions on the coffee bit that you want and my brother can prep, feel free to, I'll put a story right after this to take questions on Instagram. So feel free to put in all your questions in there and we'll go through it and hopefully, yeah, we'll be able to answer some of the questions tomorrow. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. See ya. Bye. Good night and good morning and wherever you are. So thank you so much for joining in. And yeah, see you next time.